Hey, and welcome to this lesson. We are about to build this nice chat component, so let's take a look how it works. Okay, John Smith, he sent me a message. Hi, Jussi, how have you been? How are wife and the kids? We're all good. We're all good. And I'll send the message by hitting enter. And how about you? How about you? And then, wanna grab a coffee someday. Oh, John says coffee sounds great. That's great to hear. Here, let's discuss the details later. Okay, so as you can see, we're going to build this very nice, even interactive chat component that your friend can reply to you. And this is under the hood listening for a specific keywords, and I set there a keyword coffee, and when it hears the coffee, it's going to send me a back message like this. And of course, there's a lot of going on here. First of all, we need to listen for the clicks for the chat component, then also for the field. The send button is going to be inactive at first, but then whenever content appears here, it's going to be active. And it also takes into account spaces. So if I put only spaces here, I can't send that message. So there has to be some real content. And then also, I'm going to listen for clicks outside the container. So whenever I click outside here, it's going to close the thing. We're going to listen, of course, you can use the keyboard to do everything. You can just close it with escape button. And so it's accessible with both keyboard and mouse. So there's lots going on here, but bear with me. Let's start, as per usual, by going to the drawing board and see what options we have when it comes to chatting. Okay, here we are in Figma, so let's start by drawing a spacer here and starting to discuss the options we have. If you've ever used a mobile phone, you've probably used something like text messages or WhatsApp, so you're familiar with the view where there are your contacts, maybe some avatar, name, maybe the last message, and then the list goes on. All of those people are here. And when you click any of these, you'll be directed to a view where there's the single chat, maybe a back button here, maybe the name here, and then also the messages from your friend and from you, maybe some image, and your friend replies like, haha. Okay, and then you can down here, you can write the message and send that message to that person. Another option, if this view would be on larger screen, maybe if you ever used WhatsApp on web or desktop, you'll see that you'll have the list of friends here, and this is now a bit way smaller. You have a list of friends here on the left, and then you have the actual chats here. So if you click here, this is going to be selected, and you'll see the messages right here, and you can write your own messages down here. But the option, these are the common options you have for chat, but the other option we are building is more for quicker chatting. I think you've probably seen this also on Facebook, of the Facebook Messenger. If you're on the, not the Messenger app, but within Facebook, you'll see that down on the page, there's going to be these buttons. You can click, and it's going to be the name of your friend, and then when you click on it, the chat is going to be popped open on top of that button. And then there you have the same functionality, chat messages from yourself, as well as a text field here where you can send the actual message. So we are going to build this. This is going to be a nice inline component you can use anywhere. Maybe you're building an application or something like that. You can use it there or wherever you want. But without further ado, let's go and check out how that is built visually. Okay, so how do we get this chat component to actually look good? Well, the obvious answer is that we are going to use the same design system we've used this far already. And let's start by grabbing this base layer here, and let's go all the way here, and I just paste it here. So what do we need? We do need the button for opening the chat. So how would that look? We can use the same styles here, both on the container as well as the button. So let's just zoom in a bit, and I'll just add text here. Let's use the John Smith text, and probably not extra large, but maybe even small, bold, small. I think that's okay. Let's take a look if it's too small. It's probably a bit too small, so let's take this medium. Oh, no, it looks better. Let's not make it bold. Now let's change the color to be maybe gray, darkest gray. Yeah, darkest gray is good. Okay, and then usually on these chat components, there's some sort of an indicator of the status of the person. So we want to make that here. So let's draw a little circle here, and let's change the color of that to be Now we're getting to use the green, so we draw this green circle here, maybe 8 pixels by 8 pixels. Let's zoom out to see how that looks. Well, that looks good to me. And now let's take care of the spacings. So what do we need? This is 17 and 18. No, it should be probably 12 and 12. That's fine. And 14 from there, so it should be 12 from there. So we are talking about, let's actually turn in on the grid. So now it's spacing 16, but because this is so small component. I think one thing I forgot to note is that, why are we using different spacings here? This one's using bigger spacing. I think this was 24. This was 12 maybe. Let's take a look. How much was this? 16. And this was even bigger. This was 32. So why are we using these different spaces here? What's the logic? That's a very justified question. And the answer is that it depends on the size of the component. So the bigger the component, the bigger the space is going to be needed on the sides. If we were set this to 8 pixels, that would look very, very crowded. But as we have this very small button here, we are good to go with, what's it, probably 12? Yeah, 12 pixels is totally fine with this small button component. If this had something bigger, say the 32, we would need quite a lot of spacing to get that there, and that would look a bit weird as a button if we take a look at it this way, so like this. So I wouldn't consider this to look good. So the spacing is related to the absolute size of the component itself. Okay, so let's get this aligned properly. This one was 12, maybe 12 pixels away. And now this is 11. Maybe let's make it 8. I think 8's good. And now we just need to adjust this to be, now it's 25, so 15, 14, 13, 12. So now it's 12 pixels away from all the sides. And I think we have a nice consistent button there. Okay, so how do we design the actual chat itself? Is that we just grab this base layer and then duplicate it. And let's make it to be on top of this. And maybe now it's 8 pixels away. I think 8 pixels is fine. And let's make this a bit bigger and also taller than the button itself. So what do we need here? First of all, when we're talking about user-generated content, which is the case with chats, we want to make as much room as possible for the actual content. So this is now actually set to spacing 32. So let's fix that also on the button. It was spacing 12. So let's get a spacing of 12 here also. So now we have equal spacing here. Even though this is bigger, it's going to be crowded with smaller content. So that's the reason why we are using this smaller spacing here in this component. Okay, so let's start by adding the chat bubbles here. I just call them bubbles. And how can we do that? I'll use Figma's auto layout. So I just add here a chat bubble saying like, hi, how are you? This is coming from the friend, and let's change the font to be small and the fill to be the darkest gray. And then I hit Shift A to create auto layout. And what does this do? It allows me to set the padding both horizontally and vertically, and then the element is going to resize automatically based on the content. So let's try that out. So let's set a fill here, maybe the light gray. Oh, that's too dark. Oh, this is fine. Oh, that's fine. It's a bit light, but I think the gray 200 is a bit too dark also. So let's go with the 100 for now. We could make this a bit light, darker, the lightest shade of this gray, but whatever. It's fine now. Okay, then we'll set the horizontal padding and the vertical padding. And horizontal is usually bigger than the vertical. I think vertical 4 pixels is enough here, and maybe 8 vertically, or even 4. Let's take a look. Let's add some rounding for this. We're using 6 in all places. I think this looks okay, but let's just change the gray back to the 200. Okay, and now we are changing the horizontal padding to be, I think 8's fine. So now this looks a bit better. Let's actually change the background color now that we are here, the gray 100. So you'll see that whenever you come to a situation where you realize, okay, the colors we've chosen don't work in the way we want them to work, we can go and change things. So let's go to our design system and let's pick this lowest gray, which is gray 100. And of course we could do the same here. So in real context, so here we have the gray 100. We can click this edit style button and we can make this a bit darker. So let's see how that looks. I think that's okay. Now it's a bit more prominent than it used to be. So what we did, we just changed, if we are using that same gray anywhere else, we just change it everywhere. So that was a global change, so be careful of that. And let's align these to the container so that they are actually properly aligned. And now we can make our own messages. So what's the difference between our messages and our friend messages? Well, that's twofold thing. First, the messages from friend are on the left-hand side, and then messages from ourselves are on the right-hand side. Of course, this is going to be vice versa if you are in a country where you read from right to left instead from left to right. But in our case, we are in Europe and we read from left to right. Okay, so the difference between these two is that we are going to use a different color here in the background. So let's try that blue, and as a text, let's try just solid white. Now let's take a look how that looks. We can actually check the contrast ratio of this also, that if it's fine. So we'll see. I'll check this. Okay, it passes for normal text. It passes AA, and that's good enough for us. It's 4.93. If you made this bold, that would probably change. Let's take a look. Let's make this bold. Small bold, and then because it's going to be. No, it's not going to change that. Okay, well, we're good to go with this. The AA is sufficient for us in our use case. So, what if I'm about to add another message here? And of course, if I were to build something more complex here in Figma, I would make these components, but now we're just duplicating these. Okay, so let's duplicate our own message, and let's make the spacing between our own messages a bit smaller than from the messages from our friend. And the reason for this is that we want to visually group these things. So if I set this to be 8 pixels and this to be 4 pixels, you'll see that these are in their own group and these are in their own group also. I'll just make these 4 pixels here also. So now these are visually nicely separated from each other. Okay, I don't just change the content for the text because this is for just demonstrating how this is going to visually work. Okay, and then what do we need? Oh, this is good chat, but you don't get to write. So what do we want to do is to add a text field here, and then as well as the button for sending the message. So let's start with the sending button. I'll again hit Shift A to create an auto layout here. I'll check the background to be the same blue, the color of the text to be white, and let's change the color of the text or the font of the text to be maybe medium or small but bold. Okay, and then we'll use rounding of 6. And currently, as of recording this, the problem with Figma now is that if I want to use auto layout, I'm not able to use this base layer as our basis for our style. So there's a little problem with that right now, but hopefully that will be fixed in the future. Okay, so let's align or make this a bit more. Maybe 8 from there and 4 from there. Is that too small? Maybe 8 from there, top, and 12 from the sides. Let's zoom out to 100%. Yeah, I think that looks good. And then let's put it there. And then also let's add a spacer here. So I just draw a rectangle, the height of 1 pixel. And the fill color will be the same as the border color, which is gray 200. And then we are going to position this to be the same as from this is bottom, from 12 and 12. And as you might have noticed, I think we already said this before, but in Figma, if you are measuring the distance from the bottom, it won't take into account the border here. So visually, this is actually 11 pixels from the bottom and now 12 from here. So what we can do is just move this one up or just keep it there for simplicity's sake and just think about it. It's almost in its place. Okay, so let's zoom out to see how that looks. Looking good. And then we just need the text field here, maybe type, like a placeholder. Okay, and then just use the color of gray, maybe that's good. And bold, small, maybe we want the medium, regular to be there. Something along these lines. I just vertically align this, and so let's take a look. It's 12 pixels away from there and center to the button. I think that looks already good. This is the case when there's already text. We want the send button to be active. But in the case that the send button is, in the case there is no text, we want the send button to be inactive. So let's tackle that state also. Let's change the color, background color to be something like this maybe, or even gray 200. And the send text may be something that indicates that it's not active yet. Maybe, I think this looks good. So let's zoom out. Yeah, you can probably tell that this button is not yet active. Okay, so, and now we could add some text here. Text here. And this is going to be the real text. Okay, starting to look good. We only, of course, when we open this button, this is going to be the same width as the container, and this is going to move all the way to that left-hand side. But we can do that also in the actual development phase. So without further ado, let's go there next. Okay, here we are in VS Code. So let's go straight to the chat folder and open the index start file. And I'll just close the drawer there. I also brought along the screenshot what we are going to build so that you have it there handy. Well, let's start with the structure of this component. What do we need? We need the button that is going to toggle the chat open and closed, as well as the chat window itself. And of course, the chat window, there are some little details like these chat bubbles here, the text bubbles, as well as the input and send button. So let's go and check those out first in the markup. Let's start with the chat toggle. So let's use a button with a class of toggle. And within that, let's make, there's the name, the John Smith here. Let's make a div with a class of name. And let's add there John Smith. I'll just save that. Okay, everything works, looking good. Then what we're going to need is the whole chat window. And let's also set that the chat window is going to be area hidden at first. So area hidden is going to be true. And then within this chat window, we are going to need the window itself, which includes the these messages. So window. And within that, we are going to need a couple of chat bubbles. So let's call them just bubbles. Bubble, and maybe text like, hi, how are you? And then another one, I'm good. I'm good. How about you? Okay, good. Then let's go to see the input section, which is here below the window. So let's put it here. I'll just call that input. And within this input, we need a real input, it's being text. And then we also need, let's give it a class of, say, field. And then also a button that's going to have a class of send. And let's add also text of send. Okay, so now we do have our little chat here. It's not looking very good yet, but we have the basic structure ready. So let's start by styling this whole thing. I'll just go here in the style tag, and I'll take the chat window first, and I'll position that fixed. And it's going to, because if we had a site and we are about to scroll the site, it's good that the chat will actually stay here in the, well, probably in our case, it's going to be bottom. Usually it's at the bottom. Okay, so fixed, and maybe from bottom, let's take some space. Let's use 4 maybe, as well as the right value. So now it's going to be from there. And let's also take that toggle. What's it called? Toggle? Button class send. No, the toggle. Okay, yeah, it was toggle. And then let's also position that as fixed, and then from the bottom, let's actually use the same ones from here. Okay, so now we have that there. Let's just position this way more from the bottom. So, okay, so now we have the basic structure of this toggle here, as well as the chat here. Let's add a specific width for the chat, because we can't let the contents of the chat determine the width, because there could be a very long text here. So we have to make that manually. So let's add width chat, or chat width. It doesn't really matter. 250 pixels is fine. It could be anything, just a random number here. So let's set that width, and then also the width chat. Okay, looking good. I'm so much zoomed in so that this actually looks, this is now closer to what it actually looks. So let's just zoom in for the sake of convenience. Then what else do we need for the chat? We probably need some background color. That would be white, color white, as well as some border being our variable border. Okay, looking better. Border radius maybe also. This should be pretty similar to what you've already done a lot of times. So nothing fancy here. So I'll just run this through. Okay, radius, that's good. And we won't add padding to this chat because we won't add padding separately to these two different sections. So both the input as well as the messages themselves. Okay, then for the actual chat window, let's go there. There's a chat, the toggle. Let's take the window next. Window. What did we have here? Window, and then there are those bubbles. Okay. So window, we probably want to add some padding. Let's try maybe space 2 or 3. I think 2 is good. Yeah, 2 is good. Let's try to keep this very condensed in a sense that because we are trying to fit as much text as possible within here. So let's keep it very, very tight. Okay, I'll just zoom in a bit. Okay, now we can see that again. And then let's style these single bubbles. So let's take a bubble and add maybe some background color. Color of color gray 100. I already changed the gray color to be the same as we did in Figma, so it's already there in the design system. And then we will probably want to add some margin bottom to our bubbles, margin bottom. And now we are going to separate these only in a small way, and then I'm going to show you a trick how we can separate our own messages from the one that are sent by your friend. And let's use space 1 here, which is the smallest space we have. Okay, good. And let's at the same time just remove that from the last child, which is going to be the last message. Last child, margin bottom, to set that to be 0. Okay. And now maybe some padding to these. Let's move this one up. Let's go here, padding. Not only top, but the whole padding. And then space, I think maybe 1 to the top. Let's try. Maybe definitely not 12. Let's try if I put here space 2 on the horizontal axis. Looking good. If I zoom out a bit, yeah, I think it's looking pretty fine. We probably want to still make some border radius there. Let's use the radius. Okay. And then what else do we want to do? Of course, now these, I'll just change this to gray 200 for a second so you can see them more clearly. What we essentially want to do, we want to separate the messages that come from your friend and messages you send by yourself. So how can we do that? So let's go to the window and let's display this as flex. So display and flex. And now this is going to break. And the reason for that is that by default, flex is going to align things horizontally. But we can change that, changing the flex direction property and setting that to column, and then saving. Okay, now we have everything in columns and nothing really changed visually if you take a look at these two. But now what we can do for the bubbles is that we can actually align these ones to the left-hand side and these ones to the right-hand side. So let's first align this one to the left, the basic bubble. So align self, which is going to align this bubble itself. Let's choose flex start. And now these items are going to be flown to the left. And if we want to fly this one to the right, we want to, of course, target them with their own class. So now we have this bubble. So let's call this bubble just bubble and add a class of guest. And our for the bubbles that are our own, let's add a class of own. So I'll just toggle that own class also, which is we want to align self to flex end, which is going to take that all the way to the right-hand side. Okay, so what else do we want to style for the own? Maybe make them look a bit different in terms of color, as you see here. So let's change that to background color to be color blue. I think it was 500, and then the color of the text to be color white. Okay, looking good. Also, the text is a bit too big to my tasting. Of course, it's not very big because we're on here, but maybe also it could be a bit smaller. So let's make the text smaller. So font size. Text small. Okay, now this is very condensed, very information heavy, and let's change the background color back to the 100. Okay, looking good. I think this background gray color is a bit too light, so probably I didn't change it actually to the base file yet. So let's make that change. We can just hover here in VS Code and change this to be HSL, and from 98, let's just change this to 95 and save. Okay, now it's looking better. And let's just change the format. Hover here, click a couple of times to get the hex code and hit save, and we are good to go. Okay, where were we? And one thing we probably want to do, if say I had a longer text here, I just added some long text here. You don't want this text to fill the whole container to that left-hand side. So let's limit the width of the bubble to setting max width of, let's start 75%. That's good. Maybe 80. Oh, it is good. Okay. And another thing, now say someone posted you some URL or some longer word, which is like everything in one row. The problem here is that it actually goes all the way past the content. So what we can do in CSS is we can use something called word break property. So let's use word break, and then use break word. So what it's going to do, it's going to break the word even though it's in the middle of the word. So if I hit here save, you're going to see, okay, now it's going to split this into different rows, and it respects the max width of the bubble. Okay, so I just get rid of this, a bubble on, and I'm good. I'm good. And this is just for placeholder. We are, of course, going to create this content with JavaScript later on, but for now, this is good enough. Then I'll just zoom in so that we'll see what's going on. Okay, let's next tackle the this sending section here, which is the input section. Now let's go to the input. I'll just grab that with the class input. And then we probably want to show this as flex. So display flex. And then what we want to do is to add some padding. Padding space 2 maybe? Was it the same as the container here? Yes, space 2. And then what else do we need? We do need the border there. So let's add the border top to be border. Okay, now looking good, but still the input and the send button are looking not so good. So let's tackle those two. I'll just zoom out to see everything's still working properly there at this proper size also. Okay, so let's take the field first. I'll take the field. Let's say font size, because typically the regular field text is not what we want. So we want to change that to be something else, which is going to be our text. I think medium is good. Let's try that out. Now it's bigger. It's good, especially when you're on the right side. It's good to see what you're actually typing. And then we probably want to get also rid of the border. So let's set border to 0, as well as the outline to be none. And I think in our case, it's totally fine that the selected state, which usually is shown by the outline, is now only the blinking cursor here. Of course, we could add the shadow here, focus shadow here to denote that, okay, this is now selected. But for our use case, this is totally fine like it is now. Next, let's style the send button. It was a class of send, right? Let's check that out. Yeah, class of send. Okay. And so how should we style this? So this is pretty basic again. So let's start with the padding, which is going to be something like, I think it's space 1 or 2 at the top, and maybe space 3 on the sides. Let's see. Oh, looking good. And then let's just zoom this in so that you'll see it better. Okay, and then let's add let's remove the border to be 0, and then border radius to be our nice little radius. Okay, and then we probably need also the color, background color to be color blue, 500. Okay, and the color to be color white. Okay, nice. Maybe also set the font weight to be bold. Okay, to align the button properly to the right-hand side, we need to work with flexbox so that how do we set things that is the last item here? How do we set it so that it's going to span all the way to the right-hand side? Well, in flexbox, you can do it so that you set the margin, in this case, margin left of this button to be auto. So it's going to automatically push it as far as it can go. So now we have it right there. I'll just zoom out, starting to look good. Oh, I just minused it. Okay. And one thing, I think this window is still looking a bit weird, even though it has only a couple of messages. We probably want to make it higher. So let's set also the window height here. Height. And let's use the same as the chat width. I think that's totally fine. You could use any number here, but for simplicity's sake, I just use this width of the chat. Let's see how that goes. Okay, looking better. I'll need to zoom out or get rid of this or put it right there. Okay, how are you? I'm good. Okay, starting to look better. Okay, of course this doesn't work yet. So let's continue with the send button. We had it here, the send button. Let's set it focus style, send, focus. And let's use the same as always, the box shadow of our focus. Box shadow of our shadow focus. Okay, so now if I go to that, okay, it looks okay. Let's go, well, there's something going on there. Why it's not looking good? Oh, I haven't removed the original outline of this. So let's set that to none. And now let's see how that goes. Oh, now looking good. Okay, now it works. The thing is that we want this send button to be actually inactive before we have anything here in the text field. So let's set that to be disabled. Now let's check the button here and set that just to be disabled. Okay, so now it's going to be disabled, but we want to change also the styles of that. So let's do that too. Let's call this send, and let's add an active class here, which is going to determine these blue styles. So let's add an active class here. And let's move those blue styles to the send and active. Okay, so the border, background color, and the color, I think the rest of the stuff is shared with those. So now we have the active. Let's get rid of that active class, and we are going to be shown this kind of button without any style. So this is disabled. If I remove the disabled, it's going to be shown like this, and disabled is going to be like this. And let's actually add the active there for now. Active. Okay, looking good. Looking good. So what else do we want to do? Let's go back to these text buttons here. We probably want, first of all, we could add a bit more spacing to this whole thing. So now I think it was space 2. Where's the chat? Oh no, window. Padding. Let's use space 3 here, as well as for the input padding. So they share the same. So now there's a bit more space and it looks better, I reckon. Okay, I'll just zoom that in. And what we want to do is that if we have more messages, I just add my own, like another message, another, and then another guest message here. Maybe 2 guest messages. So what we want to do, we want to group these messages so that the messages, if there are more than one from the same sender, they are going to be closer to each other than the ones that I've sent myself. So to tackle this, we need to select the messages that come right after. I just make that a bit longer text there first. Another one from me. So we need to target the message that comes after the one I've sent, which is going to be this. Or it could be from me also. So we need to make sure that it's actually not ours, but the guest message. And the same other way around. If the guest has sent message, we want to space that a bit more away if the next message is from me. So we can use something called adjacent, I think a sibling combinator. What's the proper term? But let's take our own bubble first. So own bubble, which is this one. And then this is going to be the adjacent sibling selector. It's going to target the next thing after this one. So the next that has the class guest is going to be targeted. So if this one is selected, this is own also, but the next one is not guest, so this rule doesn't apply. But here, the next one is the guest bubble, which has the guest class, so it's going to target that one. Okay, so what we want to do here, we want to set the margin top to be space 1, or not 2, space 1. Okay, so now you'll see the spacing between the messages from the same person are tightly coupled, but the difference between these groups are a bit more loose. But we want to do the same thing here, so let's also add the reverse version of this. So dot the class of guest, and then plus our own. Okay, so now these are nicely separated from each other. So let's go and still style the toggle here all the way down here. I think the toggle was here. Class toggle. Did we have some styles for it already? I guess we did. Okay, it's here. Okay, so what do we need? The usual suspects being padding. Not only padding's up again, but the padding itself, space. I think 2 from the top and bottom, and then space 3 from the sides. I think that's okay. Let's actually move this chat window a bit way up, so maybe 16. So now it's better. Back to the toggle. Okay, we were here. Then let's get rid of or set the border to be something different. We want our own border. It's going to border variable, and then border radius to be the radius, and then background color to be white. One thing we want to add is the little indicator here of the status. So let's do that as a pseudo class first now. So I just add another one, toggle, and then before. And here we can set the content of this pseudo. This is going to be an element, so pseudo element. we set the content to be nothing. If we set it like this, it would be being shown as text. So we just set it to be nothing. And then we want to set the width and height for that. Width is going to be, let's use these, even though you don't have to, but we can. So let's do so. Width, I have problems typing width. And then let's use the same height. Height, border radius, let's make that be round. I think we had a variable that for 2 in our system. And then set the background color to be color green 500, maybe. So let's take a look. Okay, nothing happened when I saved this, so something's wrong. Let's take a look. What? So it's not working. Oh, the reason is that we are putting this to a wrong place to begin with. So we want to target the name class because we want it to be here. The before element is going to be before this. So we want to target it there. So let's save. It shouldn't still appear because this is still not block element. So let's change this also to block. And now we are starting to see something more. Let's take the name and let's change that to be flex so that we can actually see those side by side. Display, so display maybe works better. Display. Yeah, I did it. Okay, looking better. Still what we need to do, we promptly want to align the items to be center. Now looking better. And let's just move this a bit away from the margin. Let's add margin right to be space 2. Let's take a look. Okay, looking good. Now looking good. Is this text a bit too small? Let's change the text a bit bigger. Toggle font size. Text medium maybe. Okay, that's better. That's a lot better. What we still need to do, we probably want to have some hover and active styles and focus styles on this button. So let's do those too. So let's take the toggle and add its hover style. Hiver, Horv. Okay, running great today. Okay, hover styles. So what can we do? We want to change the border color. I think that's a good way to separate it from just the basic status. So border color being, let's try something like color gray 400, 300. Let's try. Okay, looking okay. We can add the cursor pointer also there. Cursor to pointer. So it looks like a button, more like a clickable button. Then on focus, we don't want to show that outline. So I guess let's get rid of that too. So outline none, but then we need to reintroduce that outline effect because otherwise people won't notice when it's selected. So let's add that back and let's actually use the toggle focus and let's use some border color of, let's use the same actually, color gray 300. Let's take a look. Okay, now if I tap to that, okay, I can see that it's selected. If that's too subtle for you, go ahead and add the bigger style, but I think this is fine with us. And then when we click on it, we probably want to show also something else. Now that this is the same as the hover, we can just take this to the same declaration like this and get rid of this altogether. And then add the toggle active, which is going to be the style when we click on it. And let's change the border color to be color gray, maybe 400 this time, so we can see it a bit clearer when you click on it. Oh, okay, looking great. Okay, now we have the basic styles for this whole component. So what we essentially want to do, we want to start adding functionality to this component. I'll just zoom in so you'll see the whole thing. We can get now rid of this. We are close enough to what we had here so that we can actually work on this. Okay, let's get to the JavaScript. Okay, now we are ready for the fun part. We are going to make this actually work. There's a lot of things we need to do, so let's break this down into smaller steps. Let's first just get all the elements we need. Get elements. And then second, what we want to do, we want to open and close the chat based on the click on this. So open and close the chat. Let's just number these. So this is 1, this is 2, and the third one will be adding these messages. So adding messages. And of course, there's going to be a lot of little miscellaneous stuff in addition to these, but let's get to the action. Okay, so getting elements, it's pretty basic by now, and you should probably know it yourself. So I just copy paste these selectors. I have them there handy. So we have the chat container, which is the whole chat here. We have the chat field, which is this, and send button, which is this, and chat window, which is the place where these are going to be put, so the window within this container, as well as this chat toggle here. So what we want to do now is we want to listen for clicks on this button here, this toggle button here. And based on that click, we want to either show or hide this chat container. So essentially, we are just adding a class of visible to this chat container and then removing the class on another click. So we are toggling the class. So let's go and do that. Let's take the chat toggle and we want to listen to events. So add event listener, and we want to listen to click events. And from there, let's just make a function. Let's take the event. It could be called just E or event, whatever you want to call it, or EVT. You'll see probably a lot of variations, maybe E or EVT or event, or then you could name it whatever you like. But those are probably the three most used. Okay, but from that, what we want to do, we want to add a class of visible to this container. So let's take the chat container, and then class list. And then instead of adding and removing, now we are toggling a class. So toggle, and let's use a class called visible. And now let's try it works. I just put it here, zoom that out a bit so we'll see the whole thing. Okay, and now when I click on this, just refresh, and I'll go down here in the div. And when I click on this, you'll see that the chat immediately got this class visible when I clicked on this. But when I click this again, it's going to go away. So essentially, we're just toggling the visible class there. And this is just exactly what we want, because we want to toggle the visibility of this chat. Okay, so let's adjust the styles accordingly. So the initial state without the visible class, let's set the opacity to be 0. And then also let's remove all the pointer events we have. So let's set that to none. So now when I save, it's not going to be shown here, and I cannot click anything within that chat container. But now it's still here within the document, so you can see it here. But now let's take the chat with the class visible, and let's set that the opacity to be. I think we had a variable there called opacity 100, and as well as bring back the pointer events all. Okay, now save, and now when I click the chat, take a look. Boom! And when I click it again, boom, it goes away. So essentially, I'm just toggling the class, which is going to show and hide this chat container. So looking very nice already. But we can do better. We can do some animation and smooth transitions here in the chat. So let's do that. What we want to essentially do is we want this chat to be a bit lower to begin with, and then move that a bit to its original position whenever the chat is shown. So let's start by doing that. Let's use CSS transforms. So transform, and let's translate the y-axis. Let's use some predefined space variable here. You could of course use whatever you want here, but this is fine. And then let's remove that when the chat is visible. So let's set that to 0. Okay, let's see how that looks. Oh, nothing happened. And the reason is we haven't set any transition here. So let's go and add some transition, and let's use our variable of transition. Okay, and now when I hit this, boom, it's already starting to look a lot better. Can you take a look? Take a look at it. Boom. But I think we could do even better. What if we could set the scale of this to be a little smaller when it's hidden, and then it's going to expand to its original form. So let's do that. I set the scale here with the transform, and these are not separated by dots, so they go in a row, just space separates them. So scale, let's use 0.9. Of course, if you're building a bigger app, you probably want to have a variable also here, but for our purposes, this is totally fine for now. And then also let's reset that here in the visible class, set scale to 1. And now let's see what happens. Boom, starting to look so good. Can you see it? Boom, boom. But still, this chat container now takes the origin of the transformation from the center of itself. So when we put it, show it and hide it, you can see that it seems to appear like at this point of the button, but that's not as smooth as it could be. So let's make it so that it actually appears from this side of this button. So how can we do that? Well, fortunately, there's a property for that. It's called transform origin. So transform origin, and we can set that all the way to the right-hand side here. Transform, not from. Transform origin to right. Okay, so now when I hit here, boom. It's so smooth. Looking very good. So now we can actually expand, show and hide this chat component nicely. But what else we want to do? We want, of course, close it when we hit escape or outside of this window, but let's do that later. But now what we want to do, we want to expand this button to be the same width as the whole container. So let's do that next. Let's go down here. What we essentially want to do, we want to, first, we have to set the minimum width of this element the same as its original width, so that we can animate it from that position to be something bigger, for instance, this chat width of this chat container. So we want the width of the chat container, and we want the width of this toggle button. So let's get those first. Let's put them here in the elements. So const, I think it's like toggle width, and then we have the chat toggle here. So let's take the chat toggle, and let's use that offset width. Okay, let's log that. I made so many typos there. So toggle width, and let's see what we got. Let's go to console. Okay, 123, and that's the pixel size of the whole width of this container, all this toggle here. And let's also get the, let's just type in here, get toggle width, or the original toggle width, and also get chat window width. And we do this in the runtime. When JavaScript is going to run the first time this page loads, it's going to get these widths. So they're going to be the right ones. So chat window, then const chat width equals chat window and offset width. Okay, now we have these widths. And what we want to do in addition to this, we want to set the minimum width of this to be equal to this toggle width. So how can we do that? Well, we can just take the chat toggle, and we can set its style min width to be equal to this toggle width we have here. But we want to use these backticks and then the $sign and curly brackets to add JavaScript here. And then don't forget to add these pixel values here, because now it's going to work. But if you forget these, it's not going to work. So now if we go here, we take a look at the button here, we'll see that it also has the style min width attached to itself. The reason we need this is that we want to animate this from this width to the chat width, and without this min width, JavaScript or CSS for that matter doesn't know how to animate things from an auto width to something else. So we need that specific width there. So we got the width and we set it there to that element. Okay, let's go here. And now while we're at it, I'll just comment these. So toggle or show or hide the chat window. And what we want to do, we want to adjust or resize the toggle. And also regarding this setting the chat container visible, we also want to tell the screen readers the chat is visible. So how can we do that? Let's do that in the middle now. Now let's take the chat container again. So chat container, and then we set attributes. And as we had this chat here, we have this area hidden, and these are called attributes, and we can set these attributes to be whatever we want. So we take this area hidden attribute and set that to be false. So let's take that. Set attribute, this is a function that takes two values. First the attribute itself and then the value. So area hidden is going to be the attribute, and the value we want to set is of course false, because now when we click on this button, this is first going to be hidden, that's true, and then we click on it, boom, it's going to be set to false. So that tells the screen readers, okay, this content is actually now in your view. So back to the toggle resizing. So how can we know? Because we have two different options. When we open the chat, we want this toggle to be resized to the chat width, but when we close the chat, we want it to be resized back to its original width. So in other words, we need to know if the chat is open or closed. So what we can do, we can add a new variable for that information. So let's call that just, and now I use let, because we want to change this variable. These consts are meant to be untouched, so this chat toggle is all the way, like every time the same toggle, we don't want to change that, but we want to change the status of the chat if it's open or not. So let's call that let chat open, and let's first determine that to be a boolean which has a value of false. So now the chat is, by default, when the JavaScript runs, it knows that the chat is closed, and we want to set that information here also to false. Of course, if you were to run this and you had this open, you probably want to set this to be true to begin with, but now we set to false because in the first run, it's going to be closed, so false. Okay, so now we can use that information to set or to change the size of this. And how can we do that? Well, we use the typical if statement here. So if the chat is open, so if chat open is true, then what do we do? This would be the case that it's open. And if the chat is open is true, we want to resize it back to its original width. So we take the toggle, chat toggle, which is this button here. And we set that, the style and minimum width of that to be equal to, and then we use backticks again, and JavaScript, we want set that to be the original width the toggle was. So this was the original toggle width. So we want to set it to be, actually we'll set it to be this one. So we just copy paste here. And now that's going to be set to that one. But else, if it's not open, if it's closed like it's in the initial state, we want to do the opposite, or not the opposite, but we want to set the min width to be the same as the chat width and in pixels. So in here, we change that to be the chat width we determined here. And don't forget these pixels. I did, and I spanked my head to the wall like 15 minutes and figuring out why is this not working, and then figure out, okay, I'm missing the pixels here, and that was the problem. So be better than I am and remember those pixels. So now, when I click on this, it should resize to its bigger size. Boom! And when I close it, it should go back. Boom! But it didn't go back. What's the problem? The problem is that now, of course, we now know when we put this on, it says, okay, chat open. That's not true. It's false. So it's going to run this line. It's going to toggle that, the width of that button to be the chat button width, which exactly happens when we click this. It goes to the same width as this container here. But now when we click this again, the chat open has not changed. So it's still not true. It's still false. And it still runs this line, which will set the chat toggle width to be the chat width, which now you can see here, it's still the chat width. So what we want to do is after running this, we want to set the chat open to be the opposite of what it was when we were running this function. So how can we do that? One way to do that would be that we would set chat open just to be false. And that this would be okay. But what we want to do, we instead want to set it to be the opposite of what it was before. So now, if chat open is false here, it's going to turn it to true. And if it's true, it's going to turn it to false. So let's try that now. So now I click here, boom, and I can check actually I can go to console, I can check the chat open. So now it says chat open is true. So when I click this again, this if chat open will run because this is true, and it should set the min width back to the original toggle width. So let's try that out. Boom! It's right there, it works. But as you can see, it's not very smooth. So what we want to do, the reason we actually made it this way, we had the min width here, we had to set it beforehand and so forth, is that we can animate this whole thing. So let's go and do that juicy part right now. Okay, let's get in here. Where's the toggle? Okay, let's set the transition here. Transition. We only want to transition the min width because we don't want to transition hover status and all those kind of stuff. So let's just transition the min width, and let's do it so that we have it with the speed of what we determined before, which is transition speed as well as transition curve. Transition curve. Okay, now when we try this, ooh, it's starting to look good, doesn't it? It's actually working very nicely right now. Boom. Okay, Now one thing we can tackle is also when we open this chat, we probably want to focus the text straight to this input container here when we open the chat. So when I open, I want the text indicator be right there so I can quickly start typing. So let's do that now. So let's just put it here, somewhere here. So focus text input field. And how can we do that? We grab the chat field here. So we get the chat field, and we just use the built-in method called focus and run that immediately. And so now when I click on this, boom, it's going to put that focus there so we can immediately start typing. Okay, so now if we wanted to tackle the closing problem, we can only close this thing by clicking on this button. But of course, we want to close it also by clicking outside here, and as well as clicking ESC button. So what we want to do, we have a lot of different places where we want to run this resize function. So let's just get rid of this here and put it into its own function. I just get it rid of here. And then let's call it, what would be a proper name? Let's call it resize toggle. Resize toggle. Okay, and let's run that function. And now let's, of course, create that function also. Const resize toggle. It's going to, doesn't need any parameters. And then within here, let's put the same information. Let's try it again. If it works, I just get rid of this also. Boom, boom, it still works. Okay, now we have this nice resize toggle function here working. And of course, if we wanted to make this actually resizable, we would put here as a parameter maybe the widths we want to toggle this chat or this toggler to. So it could be something different than the chat width. It could be like, we could put here target width, and then put it also here, which would be target width. And then instead of just running it without any arguments here, we just, the target width argument we want to use is going to be the chat width here. So we would feed the resize toggle with the chat width, and now this should also work. So this would be a better way to do this, but it's totally fine for our purposes to do it this way, that we don't give any parameters here. Okay, so how can we close this thing by clicking outside this window? That's a very typical question in JavaScript. How can we close things by clicking somewhere else than in this actual thing? So thinking about the logic is that anywhere else we click, we want to close this window, but all the clicks within this chat container. So with that information, we get a lot closer to the answer how to do that actually. So let's do that. Let's just put here close chat window on click outside. Okay, so now what we are going to do, we are going to check the window, and window is this whole window we have here. So instead of the document, we are going to listen to the window, and we are going to add event listener again, and we are also listening for a click, and we get the event there. So let's add the event there, and from that, let's add a function. Just let's log this event. So what does it have? So whenever I click anywhere here on this page, I'm going to get now this event. You can see it has this a lot of information here regarding the click. What did I click? What was the place, and so forth. So a lot of things going on there. But now, what we want to do essentially is we want to check whenever we click outside the window or outside this chat window, we want to check if this chat is open. So let's write these things down here. I'll get rid of this console log here. So we want to check two things. Check two things, which are, first, is chat open? And the second one is the click inside the chat container. Okay, and with these two things, if the chat is open and if the click is outside, or let's actually check right here outside the container, and if this is true, if the chat is open like this, and if the click we make is outside this chat container, we should close this. We should close the chat. So how can we do that? Well, the first one is fairly easy. Let's start with if statement. So if the chat is open, so if chat open, we had a variable that here you can see, and first it false, and whenever this is open, it's going to be. So we can just test this log I'm open. So now when I click on this screen, nothing happens. But when I open this chat and I click anywhere, you can see I'm open. And one thing actually now that happens here that is very more detailed thing in JavaScript is something called event propagation. So when I click on this button, you can see that immediately it doesn't only toggle this chat window, but it also, the click goes through all the way from that element to the upper elements and as well, and eventually to the window, and it triggered this line here. So what we want to do, we want to stop that click there, because we want to make sure that whenever we click this function, if we click this one and want to open the chat window, then we have to stop that click event from happening or going further to the window, because that would trigger this closing function we are going to write here and immediately close this window, so it wouldn't even open. So what we can do now at this point, we can just go here in the toggle chat and chat toggling and just do something called stop propagation. So we take the event and we stop propagation. Stop propagation, and that's a built-in method in JavaScript. And now when I save it and go here, and when I hit this, you see that the window, this line didn't run anymore. But now if I click outside, of course, it's going to run again. But this is essential so that we can actually open the window, or open the chat window when we click on this button. Okay, now this event listener function is getting a huge inside this chat toggle, so let's just get rid of that and put it into its own function. So chat toggle add event listener, let's just call the function toggle chat, and I put it into its own function. So const toggle chat, and then there's the function. Okay, now let's check everything still works. It does. And now we can check the clicks everywhere on this window. And it's still, of course, registering clicks also on this container. So anywhere we click on this window, it's going to say, apart from this button, it's going to say I'm open. When this open, it's going to say, okay, I'm open. Okay, so how can we make so that only the clicks in this chat container won't close it, but all the clicks outside that will do? We'll take a look at that now. So let's go down here to this event listener we had here attached to the window. So if the chat is open, and what is the other check we want to do? Is the click outside the chat container? So how can we check that? Is that we can write something like, let's make an if statement here again. So if chat container contains, and this contains is going to check whether this container contains something. And now the funny thing is that we can check the event target. So we can put event target here. So essentially what's happening here is, I just log this here, log testing. Okay, now we check if the chat container contains the target of the event. So what the target is going to be, it's going to be, if this is true, if the chat container actually has the thing we clicked, if we click here, this testing won't run. But if we click here within the chat container, the testing line here will run. Now, we know whenever a user is clicking on the chat container, so we can use this here also with the if statement. Let's get rid of this. I just take this out here, and we can combine these two. So if the chat is open, and this is this double ampersand, this means and if the chat is open and chat container contains this target. But what we want to do, we don't want it to contain, we want the opposite. So what we can do, we can add a bang sign here, which is an exclamation mark, to make this opposite. So this is going to change this. If this is true, it's going to change false. And if it's false, it's going to change it to true. So now we can check if the click actually happened outside this container and if the chat was open. And now open this window, chat window, and click outside. It's going to say I'm open or whatever right here. And when we click here within this chat container, it's not going to do anything. So now we have the information. Now we know when the user is actually clicking outside this container, so we can run some closing operations here within this line. So let's actually make a new function for closing this chat window. So within this line, let's actually add this also here. So we check these two things, and then within here we want to add a function called close chat maybe. I think it's close chat is good. And let's just run that function there. And now for that function, let's start to write that. Let's move I usually keep the structure so that we have these variables here, and then the functions there, and then the event listeners as the last thing here on the bottom. So let's go there. I just save it there and check everything still works. Close chat is not defined, of course, because we haven't done that yet. So let's do that now. Here we have the toggle chat. So under that, let's add a new function called close chat. And that doesn't need any parameters either. So what we want to do now, we have the chat container. Let's just write down the things we want to do. So first, close the chat and let the screen readers know that the chat is closed. And then we want to resize our toggle, What else? And we want to set the chat open Boolean to false. And then we want to maybe take the focus out of this. So maybe defocus input field, and maybe also set focus on this chat button here. So focus on the toggle. Okay, so a lot of things to do. So let's first close the chat. How do we do that? Well, we just do the reverse of this one. We take the chat container, class list, and then remove the visible class. And then also we take a duplicate of this one, and we want to set the attribute of area hidden to be true again. Okay. And then we had the resizing toggle here as a function, so we can just also run that here. So resize toggle, and let's run that. And now you see that we have these nice functions. It's easy to reuse everywhere. And let's also set the chat open Boolean to be false, so it's not going to be open anymore. I'll just save at this point and see if everything works. Okay, now I go here, I click outside, boom. Clicking outside closes it. What about clicking on this button? It does work. Everything works. Boom, I can click outside, I can click on this button, and it seems to work. Okay, what's this? Okay. So let's finish this one, this closing function. So defocus the input field. How do we do that? Well, the input field was chat field. Okay, so let's take the chat field, and let's take the focus away from there. That's called a blur in JavaScript. There's built-in method for that. And let's also focus on the toggle. So the chat toggle and focus, and let's run that also. So now when I just click outside this function, this should be in focus again, and I can confirm that by hitting space, and now the focus is moving back to that field there. Okay, a lot of progress here. Let's also now toggle a couple of different event listeners. We want to hit the escape key to close this also. That's good usability, so let's do that also. So close the window on clicking outside. So add another, close the chat window on escape key. Escape key. So how do we do that? So let's take window again. So let's listen for the window and then add event listener. And this down, it's going to be, instead of click, we want to listen to an event called key down, which is going to be the event when a key is pressed down. So on that point, when for instance, in our case, the escape key is pressed, we want to listen to that event. Okay, and let's take the event and let's run another little function here within this event listener. And what we are going to do, we want to check if the key that we pressed was escape, and then run the close chat function. So let's do that. So in JavaScript, there's something called, this event has an attribute called key. So we can check if event key equals, and it has a name, like a real name called escape. And we also want to check that the chat is open. So we don't want to run this chat close chat function if chat is not open. And then we just use the close chat function here. And let's see if that works. I just open chat and now hit ESC on my keyboard. Boom! It did work. Great. Woo! Nice. We could, if you want to check more on the events on the keys, you can just log the event key, and then you'll see here in the console now. When I put here open, I hit now G. It's going to show G. I hit whatever I hit here. It's going to be shown there. I hit enter. It says enter. Space is just space. And that was that. And escape is that. So that being escape, it can now close that chat window. Okay, we are running fast here, doing a lot of things. But next thing, I think the biggest thing is that we want to actually create this content here within the chat container. So let's go into that next. So what we want to do, we want to get the input value from here, and then, actually, before going to that actual thing, we want to disable this button if there is no content here. So how can we do that? Well, we can add another event listener, and this time we want to listen for the chat field and add event listener. We listen for input event. So whenever we add stuff here into this input field, this event listener will fire a function we determine here. So let's add a function here. So what do we want to check? We want to check if this input field has some real content in itself, and then set the state of this to be not disabled but enabled. So let's actually just go to that button and let's remove that active state there. So we have that as default. Okay, now it looks better. And then let's go down here to that chat field input function, or event listener listening for the input. And then we run this function when there is some input. So we want to check first if there is any content within the input field. And we also want to check if the content is, I just type in here real, so equals not spaces. So we don't want the person to be able to write just spaces and send some empty message here. So we want to check for that too. So let's tackle the first one first. Okay, if there is any content within the input field, how do we check that? Well, there is a great way in JavaScript to do that. We can check the chat field's value. Let's actually just do it first here. So I check the chat field, and its value. I just log that. So log chat field and its value. So now, whenever input happens here, it's going to, okay, I'll just get rid of this condition here. Okay. And now when I type something here, it's going to be, the value is going to be logged here as input changes here. So I get the value from this input. And now I can check if this input really has some value and then change this. So what we can do is we can check if a chat field value length is greater than 0. And the length means, we can just actually just log that, so you'll see how it works. So length, now when I hit some letter here, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, and as long as the string is going to be here. And if I remove those, it's going to be less. We want to check it's more than 0, and as well as with the spaces, that there are something else than spaces, because spaces do count as values here, so we need to check that separately, but let's first check this one. So if this is greater than 0, then it's going to be true. So now it's true, but when I go all the way back to 0, it's going to set false. So we want to check, so if, and now we can take this as a condition. So if this is true, then let's tackle the space just in a minute. Let's change, add the active class to the send button. So send button class list add active. And now, in addition to this, we want to set the disabled state to false, of course. So let's take send button disabled to be false. Okay, now let's save this, and I go here and I start typing. Boom. Great. But now the other problem, I can just put here spaces. And even though if I go back to 0, it's still going to keep the state because we don't have any else statement here. So this runs, changes to active, but it doesn't change back to non-active when something else happens. So let's check that too. So let's put else here, and then let's reverse these actions. So let's put this back here, and let's remove this class, and then set that to true. Okay, now let's see if that works. I go here, I write stuff, then I go back. It's going to go back and forth to the active state. But still, the problem persists with space, so let's check that too. In JavaScript, we can do something that is called trimming. And if I take, let's go here to the console. I make an empty string here with 3 spaces or whatever amount of spaces, and use a method called trim. It's going to return an empty string, which in turn will return false. So if I check if this is true or false, it's going to return false. So if the trimming function returns false, then this is going to return false. So let's take the chat field value and trim that. So that now, and let's add 2 ampersands. So we had 2 different things here. We first checked that there is some content, that it has length, and it's more than 0. And we checked that if that content trimmed is really something else than just spaces. So let's try now running this. And now I hit spaces here. Ooh, and nothing happens. Because it doesn't satisfy the second condition, because trimming this content now here is going to be an empty string, which turns to be false in JavaScript. If I add a character here, it's going to be okay, and it's going to be shown like that, because then it's going to be fine. And that's it, what we need for here. So let's start now by adding this content here. So let's create a new function. Let's go probably just below this resize toggle here. Let's call it just, not that one, but const add message. Okay, add message and equals function. And then let's run some stuff here. So we're going to bind this function. I just temporarily add the event here, and I'm going to put this function, I'm going to log the event. I'm going to put this function to this send button here. So let's go to the event listeners. Let's put it down here. So this is going to be the send button, and then add event listener. And let's listen for the click again. And then let's run the add message function. Okay, now we got that set up. So I just click to make sure it works. So send. Oh, it just got the mouse event from my click, which is the exact it should be. Okay, so, but what we want to do here, we want to first create a new message. And of course, this has a lot of subcategories, which are like create a div, then also set class for that div. And then what else do we need? We need, of course, we want to know that which one is our own and which one is from our friend. And then what else do we need? We need to set the contents of this message to be the same as input field here. So set the content of the message. And then we want to put these on the bottom of this message thread here. So place the message to the chat window. And then scroll to the bottom of the chat window. Because whenever we add more chat content here in the chat, we are running out of space, so we need to keep it consistently on the bottom of this view. Okay, so a lot of things to do here, so let's get going. So let's first create a div here. So let's call that const chat bubble, and that's going to be a document create element, and it's going to be a div. And then we can add a class to that. There's a couple of ways to do this. By far, we have, I just take the chat bubble, and this far we have taken the class list and add, but we can also just add a class name, because this is going to be the only class that this has. Class name is equals, and then let's call it bubble. And it's because it's a class we have here in the document, and we want that to be that. So set class for that div, and set the content of the message. So how do we do that? That's the nice part of this. So we want to take the value of this field and put that into this chat bubble div we just created. That actually sounds pretty cumbersome, but it's not that hard after all. So we take the chat bubble, and set its inner text, because this is going to be only text, not HTML, to be the value from the chat field, which is the chat field value. And so now when I hit save, of course nothing's gonna happen here, because we haven't yet placed this div anywhere. So let's do that right now. So how do we do that? We take the where we want to put this, we take the chat window, and from there we append child, and then that's going to be our chat bubble we just created there. Now when I hit save and go here, add some stuff here and click send, boom, we can actually set messages, but oh, now we have some styling problems here. We probably want to set the overflow of this container to be hidden. So let's go to the chat window. Where was it? Window here. Let's just set the overflow y, well, not hidden, but overflow y to scroll. So now let's try it again. Let's add some stuff here. Now it works, and you can actually scroll this window. Oh, looking nice. If you're using Firefox, there's going to be some padding problems on this bottom, and that's a known bug in Firefox, so don't worry about that too much. It can be fixed with some pseudo classes, but we are not doing that right now here. Okay, so another thing still left, or a lot of things left here, but we want to scroll the view all the way down to this chat whenever we add new messages. We don't want the messages, go here, hidden behind this field. So let's go to the add message. And now we had the scroll to the bottom of the chat window. The logic here is we want to take the height of this chat window and then scroll all the way from the top to that position here on the bottom. So what we can do, we can take the chat window and set its scroll top to be equal the chat window scroll height, which is going to be the scroll height, which is going to be the inner height of this window. So let's see if that works. Okay, I'll go here. I add some stuff, more, nice. Well, the only problem now we are talking on behalf of our friend because we don't have our own message here. So how could we tackle that is that we could actually add a new class here, which is our own. How could we create these messages so that we either want to create our own messages or we want to create messages for our friend? If we're talking about the backend system or the system here, we want to create both messages. Of course, we ourselves can here in the service can only create a message here for ourselves, but the system itself needs to create both of these. And on that level, we probably want to set this whole bubble creation thing aside as its own function, which would take a lot of parameters, how to position that and where should that go, and if it's its own message and so forth. So let's do that now. I'll get rid of all of these, and I'll just call that const create bubble. And that's going to be a function. And let's paste stuff here within this. Okay. Now, well, this create bubble, instead of hard coding all this stuff here, this chat field value and this chat window and everything, we can use them as parameters. And of course, we could do the same here in a lot of the other functions, but let's use this as an example, how we could make this more reusable as a function. So let's actually get rid of these. They don't look too good there. What do we have here in function? We have different things that we want to set aside as parameters here in the function. So we have, well, the chat field value, that's going to be the message. And then we have the chat window, which is going to be the destination where we want to put this. And then we have also what we haven't done yet is is this message our own or is this message going to be someone else's? So let's put this here just for starters. So destination and then message. And this, you can name these the way you want. And then let's set a property called owner or attribute or placeholder for owner. And let's, to set the default value, we can just use a equal sign here. So owner equals, and let's set that to own. Okay, and now we can replace this. The destination is going to be the chat bubble we'll create here within the function, that's good. But here, the chat field value is going to be our message. And then the chat window where we append this chat bubble is going to be the destination. And also we want to do the same things within destination here. So now we've got rid of this all hard-coded stuff here within this. So we don't reach out this function anymore, but we take in the stuff we need as parameters. And now within this function, we can run this create bubble by giving these parameters. So let's try that now, by the way, first. So create bubble, and let's now give this. What is the destination? Now, as you can see, VS Code gives me destination. It can be of any type because we haven't defined any types for this. So destination, we want to be was it chat window? Okay, so let's put here the chat window. And then the message, what we want to put was the field, chat field. Was it chat field maybe? Chat field, yes, it's a field. And where were we? Here, create bubble, destination. Here, chat window, and that's going to be the chat field value. And then this is going to be the message. And then the last one is going to be, is it our own or someone else's? So let's just type here, own. Okay, and now I hit save, and I go here and I cross my fingers, hope this works, and hit send. It still works. It works exactly the same way, but now we have taken out everything that refers to outer things out of this function so that this could be easily used elsewhere by just changing these parameters or these arguments that we pass in as the parameters here. Okay, so how can we determine if the chat bubble will be our own or our friends? Is we can check that here. So check if bubble is own. And then we can do just a simple if statement here. So if the owner equals own, then for the chat bubble class list add, and let's add a class of own, and else, let's just duplicate that, else, let's add class list of, was there something that was own and guest? Okay, so let's add that guest, own, instead of own, let's add a class of guest. So now let's try that. I put here, I add a message here. Boom! Can you see? It's now my own message. I can put it here and I can send it. Boom, it's working very nicely. Okay, so of course, now what we want to do is that we want to check a couple of things also here so that this cannot be empty, this field. If this is empty and people somehow manage to hit the send even though it's disabled here, let's actually try if we can get rid of that disabled there, the button here, and then send empty message. Now it's not disabled. Oh, now we can send empty messages. Such a hole in our system. So let's tackle that. Let's use the same logic we had here, the chat field length check and the trim check. We could of course put this also in its own function just to check these two things. But now let's just copy paste because this is only two places. So before adding the message, let's check that if chat field value is that length is more than 0 and the value trimmed is true, so more than empty string. Okay, so now we cannot send, even though I went here and added spaces and went here to not disable this, I cannot send this because it doesn't pass this condition. Okay, I'm almost running out of breath. Okay, what do we do next? As you see, when I type here the message and I hit send, it's going to, let's just do this again, type here send, it's going to keep this. So I want to get rid of this value. So how can I do that? We can take the chat field, and set that to be just empty. And now when I send a message, oh, it didn't work. Why it didn't work? Oh, let's take console here. Console, what's wrong? Variable, assign to constant variable. Oh, of course, the chat field, the chat field itself is a constant, so we cannot change that straight. But what we can do, we can change its value, because that's not the constant we are changing here, but its value. So now, if I go here, hit send, it's going to empty this. Of course, what I also want is to put the focus back here on this field. So let's do that also. So let's just comment these empty the text field, and then refocus on text field. So chat field, and then focus. Okay. So now let's see it works. I go here, I hit send, goes back here, I can send more messages. Okay, great. Already looking very good. And clicking outside the container goes well. Nice. Okay, what else? Maybe now that I send a message, this active state is going to persist here. So we want to get rid of that too. So in addition to these, remove active state from button. So let's take the button, which is I think the send button, class list, remove active, as well as send button disabled state. Let's set that to disabled to be true. Okay, now let's try it out. I write here a message and it goes back to the disabled state. Great. Okay, looking good. Looking good. Okay, what next? What else do we need? Well, one thing, now we can just type here and we cannot hit enter. Of course, we could make this a form and then make this button to be the submit button. But for the sake of testing, let's now create that manually so you'll see how it goes also. So we can grab the send button here. Let's go to the event listeners. So let's let's also move that comment away from here because we are already adding messages here. So let's create a new event listener and let's listen for the send button. Send button add event listener. And we are listening to key down again. And here, let's make a function. Let's have the event here also, because we're going to need that. And it's actually pretty similar to the escape key we had here. So let's just copy paste this one and change the window to be send button. So if event key is enter, and of course if the chat is open, then we want to add message. Run the add message function, which is right here, up here, this add message. Okay, now let's save. Now let's try that out. I write something here and I hit enter. Oh, it doesn't work. Something's wrong. So let's take a look at that again. Okay. Oh, we actually don't want to listen for the enter because the enter doesn't go to the button itself, but we want to actually listen for the window. So let's do that now and try if it works. So right here down and hitting enter actually sends the message. Okay. Okay, looking good. Looking good. I can send nice messages. And of course we could make this even better, like changing the line height here, or the height of this container whenever we hit a new line here. But that's a bit more advanced, so we won't go there because we're already running fairly long in this lesson. So one last thing I want to do to show you the power of having this create bubble creation in a separate function. We can trigger your friend to send. Let's actually remove all of these placeholder contents here for now. What we had here. So we only had that like, hi, how are you? Let's add a comma there. Okay, so that's the first thing. So if I say something like, good, and wanna grab coffee, we would trigger this. This is just for fun purposes. We could trigger it so that whenever there is going to be in the message, there's going to be this word coffee, it's going to answer something. So let's do that. So let's first define the keyword that we are going to use. So const keyword equals coffee. And this is a string, so that's why there are these quotes here. And then what we want to do, we want to go to the create bubble function. So there are a couple of places where we can put this, but I'll just go to the create bubble function and let's check if the message, so if the message includes our keyword. This is a way to check in JavaScript if something includes something. So we can check if this message we pass into the create bubble here in the add message, which is going to be the, where's the create bubble, which is going to be this chat field value. So we can check if that includes our keyword, which is coffee, and then we can just add reply. But let's make a function for that too. So add response. Let's run that function here, and let's also create that function. So let's create a new function. This time we are going to, because no one answers instantly, we are going to create something which is going to run after a certain timeout. So let's make a function, const add response. And it's going to be a function that's going to run a timeout. So set timeout in JavaScript. So this is going to run a function which is going to run after a specific amount of milliseconds. So we are going to set that to, say, 1,000 milliseconds, which is 1 second. And now we want to create bubble here. So we're essentially running the create bubble within the create bubble again if the keyword, if the message includes our keyword, which is coffee. And so create bubble, what do we have here? With destination, it's probably going to be the same chat window as in the other chat window. And then the message is going to be, coffee sounds great. Okay, or we could even use the keyword here to make it more fun, but let's just keep it simple for now. And then the owner of the message is going to be guest. And now let's try to run this. I'll just write here, hi, how are you? I'm good. Coffee? Ooh, did you see that? A friend of ours, John Smith, replied to us that coffee sounds great. Okay, let's answer to John. Great, let's do that. And that will conclude this lesson. Hopefully you've enjoyed it this far, and see you in the next video.